Frank J. Avella with the Contending. The charismatic Matt Rodin leads the off-Broadway cast of Beau the Musical, currently wowing audiences at Theater 154 in downtown New York City. I'm pleased to have him here today. Welcome, Matt. Welcome, Matt. Really, Frank? Welcome, Matt.
That was a nickname for me for a long time, was Welcome Matt. You know what I mean? That was I think like I also had a screen name that was Welcome Matt at one point.
Oh my God. Yeah, I can't believe I fell right into that.
Right into it.
Well, listen, it's a terrific performance. Congratulations.
Thanks so much, and thanks for your generous review too. I was so touched, and I'm so happy that it's connecting with people and that we're finally getting to share it.
I think it's a really important show, and it's a queer empowering show, which we'll get into later. But first, I wanted to ask, you've been with it for 7 years. Can you take me through the process and how it's developed over that time?
Yeah, so I met Douglas. I was hosting. I've been in New York for about 10 years, and one of the things that I've done in my 10-year career here was I hosted a night, these sort of concerts at the W Hotel in Times Square called Broadway at the W, and Douglas happened to be there on one of those nights. I don't even remember what. I don't know. Some show was being featured, and I got to play a song at the end of the night. And Douglas came up to me and was like, "Hey, I'm working on the show, and I think you'd be perfect." And that thing it kind of happens in New York sometimes, where you meet people, but you never really know. And about a month later, I was in a rehearsal room with Douglas, his co-writer Ethan, and Jeb Brown, who was just nominated for Dead Outlaw, and a producer, and we read the first version of what this show was. It was not complete yet. There were not all the songs weren't done. I don't even think the script was finished, but there was something there. And luckily for me and for Jeb, like Doug kept us on board. And so over the last 7 years, it's been readings and workshops. We did a developmental production up at the Adirondack Theater Festival. They did a concept album with Sony Masterworks that I got to be on. We shot a movie in 2021 that we filmed in 6 days, which was really intense, but such a rewarding process and so informative of where we are now. We use so much of what we did in that movie, which no one really has ever seen, to inform how the show now functions and moves. So it's been such a joy. And, for an actor, I mean, how many opportunities do you have to get to stick with something for that long? Typically, they kind of rotate people in and out. So this show, especially because it utilizes so many of my skills, everything from, playing guitar and singing and acting, but also hosting, which is something that I really love doing. This show gets to sort of stretch me in all those ways. And I feel very, 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 very blessed and very grateful that they've kept me around, and that now it feels, the biggest compliment that I've been getting from people is that it feels very organic. It feels like it's me telling the story, even though it's not me. It feels like it's me and my story being told, because these words and songs are in my bones at this point. I've grown up so much with this character. My voice has completely changed from when we started this process 7 years ago to now. So it's been amazing. And it's very different doing it at 26 versus, 33. It's a completely different ball game, but it's been so joyful. And, I'm really, really happy that we're again, finally getting to share it with people, because it's been a part of my life for so long.
And you mentioned your age, and one of the things I think that works so well is that you play him at 12, well into his 20s. And then the production, of course, non-linearly leapfrogs all around, but you somehow manage to make that all believable. How the fuck do you do that?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm really lucky that Josh, our director, Josh Rhodes, was super encouraging, but not ultra specific in terms of what he wanted from this 12-year-old boy. And I think what that gave me permission to do was to inhabit a youthful energy or a youthful intention or a youthful sense of life, which comes out in a myriad of ways. Obviously, there's small mannerisms that I can trickle in there that help just indicate, even subconsciously, that I'm not 27 anymore. But but there's also vocal things that I do, and again, just like trying to see whatever moment I'm in from the perspective of a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old, closeted queer kid who is trying to connect with this grandfather or his mother or this bully or his best friend. It's such a. I was just telling my mom this morning. I was like, it's just such a joy to be in the show because I don't feel. I'm never bored. I'm never ever ever bored in this show. And the fact that I get to switch between this 12-year-old and this 27-year-old or 13 or 17, whatever age he's at within the story, it's really fun. And I get to take the audience on that journey with me. And I get to be an observer of myself too. Like I comment on things that I'm doing at 12 years old as well. So that is like part of the fun for me. It's been nice to not have to feel like I need to like completely, change my entire being to be 12. But again, in the movie, we were able to cut back and forth, right? So we were able to like, it was still me, but I was able to like really have a stark change to being 12 versus 27. And we did need that contrast. And with this show, because it's happening line to line, basically, sometimes within the same line, it has to be subtle and simple enough that we understand, or as an audience, we understand when the switch is happening. And again, my whole goal is just to like bring people in on that journey and to feel like we know this 12-year-old boy and like I'm commenting on him as well.
All right, let's speak a little bit about the queer empowering aspect of this show because as I said in my review, those of us who live in these major cities, we take for granted how accepting things are, and they're not really anymore.
Yeah.
But we don't realize that when you take one step outside, like I live in the suburbs of New Jersey, and it's really different.
It's different. I mean, I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, which and in a fairly like liberal sort of forward-thinking town. But still, I think in the early '90s, 2000s, really, like it was just a different time to be queer, and I think especially for me, it was about representation and about what I was seeing in the media, because really the only things that I had were either, there was obviously so much talk about what was going on with the AIDS crisis. So there was a lot of like suffering and sadness around things, or we had the sort of birdcage, right? Like this sort of hyper feminine, flamboyant kind of queerness, and there wasn't really a middle ground. And for someone like me, who now I have a much deeper understanding of like what it means to be queer, which is just like loving all of who you are. But I didn't feel like I had anyone representing like my version of what queer could be, or what my queerness even like looked or felt like internally. And I think what's been so powerful about this show, at least for me, is being able to embody my queerness in my way. I did All the World's a Stage, which was another off-Broadway show immediately before this, which was this musical by Adam Guan, which was also like so close to my heart. And again, I played a closeted queer man in a small town. And again, I feel very, very lucky that they were encouraging of me just being in my own presence and being in my own body and not needing to sort of like pump up anything in any specific way. And the response that it's gotten from both of those shows, again, to just be able to be my whole queer self in all the ways that I feel, or at least in some, I should say, not all the ways, but in some ways, it's just such a privilege. And I think for people that live outside of the cities, like you said, there's a tendency to feel like they're not represented or not seen. By what's going on here in sort of these mass media worlds, and what it means to be a queer person outside of New York or LA or Chicago, like that, you're still a part of the community, and getting to play those characters has been such a privilege. Even being on tour. I mean, I was on tour with Company for a year playing Jamie, who is a little more flamboyant than both of these characters, But even going to small towns, in Arkansas and Idaho and Iowa, like you go to these places and I didn't realize how many queer people were still living in these places, but don't feel like they have uh, a place to call home or a community or just an opportunity to feel seen by a piece of work that's out there.
You mentioned company, and I wanted to ask you about that because that was pretty much your big break. Playing a role like I saw it in London, I saw it, of course, here in New York, and playing
Yeah.
a role like Jamie is so important. Besides the fact that you have to deal with the vocal gymnastics of getting married today. Yeah, I mean, you were on again on tour with that, going to all these different places. Well, that must have been truly incredible.
Yeah, it was. I mean, listen, I've always wanted to tour. That was something that was always sort of like on my bucket list card, especially because like I said, I'm from Chicago, so getting to like go play my hometown was a big deal for me. I never thought it would work out the way that it did. Again, I've been in New York 10 years, so I've been doing this a long time, and the fact that it landed in my lap in the way that it did, the timing that it did. I mean, I don't know if you've heard the story, but my final callback for Jamie was the day of my wedding. So I got married to my husband at 11 a.m. in Central Park, and at 2 p.m. I was singing "Not Getting Married Today,"
Oh my God.
and in a callback. And it's crazy to think about, and being on the road with that show and telling this queer story was something I didn't even know that I really needed to do. I got to live in Jamie for a year, like which is a long time, and to be out and queer on stage is one thing, but to be out and queer on stages all over the country every single day for a year is a totally different thing. And I mean, basically what I tell people is I'm like, you pick an adjective, that's what tour was for me. Like, it
Mm.
was the most joyful and the most challenging experience of my life, right? Like, you go to certain places and, we're the end of Act One and you come back for Act Two and people have left because either they don't like company or they weren't sure what the show was, or they just didn't feel like, there were people going in the lobby yelling at our ushers talking about how they don't want, the queer agenda pushed on them. And obviously that's not what our intention was, right? Like, I'm there to just like truly Jamie's there to like make people laugh, but also like open up people's minds to understanding, again, like a nuanced queer experience, right? Like, the song is funny and the number is amazing, but Jamie, other than Bobby, really is the only character that gets like an arc through the whole piece. We see Jamie at the very beginning, and he's the last one that speaks to Bobby at the end of the show.
Yeah.
And there is an arc with Jamie, especially in that scene, which is just a brilliant, brilliant book scene that I like. It was such a joy, and I felt like acting class every night because I was with these other actors that like we really played tennis. We kept the ball in the air every night. But inhabiting a queer person as a queer person is such a gift and something that I've gotten to do a lot. I mean, I was Hedwig at Milwaukee Rep in 2019 into 2020, and being in that body for 3 months was unbelievable. I did Rent at Paper Mill, and my Roger, I always like to say, like, there was definitely some queerness in him, between him and Mark, and being just in a queer story of that kind, right? Like, that is a show that is queer with it because it's outside of our traditional musicals, right? It has a queerness about it. Yeah, I feel very, very lucky and totally surprised, honestly, that that's sort of where I've like fallen, is that now I'm doing these like queer musicals, especially these two back to back this year. Like, I cannot believe my good fortune. And I feel so privileged and so lucky to be inhabiting queer roles as a queer person, and nuanced queer roles. That's the other thing for me, is
Yeah.
that like the fact that these are nuanced, whole, really, really interesting people that are not heroes or villains. They're both Beau or both Ace and for Ricky in All the World's a Stage. You sometimes you're rooting for them, and sometimes you're not so happy about what they're doing or the actions that they're taking. And to me, that was something I really struggled with in school and college, and also in the beginning of my career. Like, I want to be liked by the audience, but I get a really big thrill of like pushing people in that way and challenging. I like work that challenges audiences. That's the kind of work I like to go see, is the kind of work that makes me think, or just makes me feel uncomfortable in some way, gets me out of my comfort zone. Every once in a while, I want to go watch something that's like a good time and like just smile and laugh. But I like things that just push my buttons a little bit. And again, I think that both of these roles have been like just an incredible opportunity to do that.
I'm the same exact way. And you know, it's interesting because his Ace's relationship with Ferris, I don't want to really give anything away, but it does end on a note where Ace is able to make a decision for himself. And
Yeah.
that we don't see that often.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that Douglas has talked a lot about is that this show, we do touch on queer suffering. We do touch on what it means to like have to carry the burden of being a queer person in a small town, like we've been talking about. But there is redemption at the end of the show, and we the number that is it's the final number in the show, or not really the final, but it's the 11 o'clock number in the show, which is a false ending. Basically, we do this big number blowout at the end of the show. The reason why it's there, and Douglas has talked about this a lot too, is that like it needs to feel like a redemption. It needs to feel like a celebration, that after we've gone through this thing together, by the end, we do feel like we're triumphant. We have conquered something together. And the piece that I didn't even realize that I've actually gotten from the feedback that I've gotten is that like from the beginning of the show, even subconsciously, as an audience, we see Ace telling this story from the beginning. So we know that he does get to the other side. Like
Yeah.
we like even if we don't think about it, like there's a knowing that we have that like, oh, it is gonna be okay because he's telling this story now, which is not something I like ever thought about. But like even just me inhabiting like just like my own subtle queerness in the first 15 minutes of the show, that sends a signal to us to say like, oh, we're gonna be okay. Like it's gonna be okay no matter what happens tonight. And no matter how the story unfolds, like we're going to get to a point at the end that like, oh, right, this is a concert that we're in and we're hearing this story. So there's going to be redemption in it, which is, again, like as an actor, so satisfying because I can leave the show at the end of the night and I don't have to feel like I want to crawl into a hole,
Yeah.
which All the World's a Stage was one of those shows where the story, it does have like a clean wrap, but it doesn't, I don't get to have the like, closing door scene as Ricky, and so I would leave the show every night like pretty depleted and cooked. Whereas this show, I leave the show and I'm like my heart is open and I feel very whole and like it's just so much light. There's Douglas says the show is like a hug for queer people, which I really feel.
It is very much so. It's like the reverse of Sunset Boulevard, where he opens in a body bag, and so we know it's not going to end well for him.
That's right. That's right. Oh my God, that's so good. That's so good. That is totally right. Right. We know he comes out at the end. So like we know that he comes out in the beginning. So like you're like, okay, he's gonna be fine. Like he's not gonna kill himself. Like he's gonna be fine. Like it's gonna be a good story. That's so funny. I hadn't thought about that. Wow.
I I have to compliment you on your vocals because in some shows deciphering lyrics can be a challenge.
Mm.
With enunciation and things like that, but also, being able to play the role that you're playing while you're vocalizing. So yeah, kudos there.
Thanks. And it's interesting, especially with pop music too. I saw Dead Outlaw last week, and I was blown. I mean, I love
Ah,
the show.
it's so great.
But I was blown away too by similar to the thing you were talking about, like the clarity. I was able to understand the lyric so clearly. And with pop and rock music, I feel like a lot of times it's very easy to get into sort of like lazy vowel and consonants. And so I really appreciate that. And again, like the score, I obviously am obsessed with the score, and getting to live in it for 8 years has been really helpful because now I'm able to navigate it in a way that someone asked me last week, like, are you thinking about what parts of your voice that you're putting it in. And the answer is yes and no. So like there are moments of the show that I don't have to think about it at all, but there are moments of the show where I am like being very, very active in playing my voice like an instrument is how I
Mm.
really think about it. Which I'm also playing guitar on top of that, but it is yeah, I get a lot of joy and like I'm having so much fun singing this music because it's such good music to sing.
What can you tell us about the film version? Because I know it was shot, and whenever I inquire, I seem to either I get stonewalled or I'm just crickets.
Yeah, no, I'm listen. I didn't sign an NDA, so I have no. So we spent. I think they ended up spending like $4 million on this movie that we shot in like I said 6 days. So the process for the movie was basically we went into the studio and we recorded all the music uh, as like studio tracks, and those were what we used. We had in-ears in the movie, so we played along to our tracks, and I actually sang along to myself in the movie because we wanted to be able to sync later, like from 7 different angles, you want to be able to
Yeah.
sync the vocal. So I was singing along to myself, which was also a crazy experience. But we also shot the movie out of order. So because of the way movie shooting works, we would do these three scenes in one day, and then we would do these two songs another day, and we do those two songs. We do this song 4 times and this song 3 times, and it was not linear. So, you know, I did all of my monologue moments happened in one day. Like we shot all of them back to back to back to back to back, and it would be like, okay, say that line, and I'll like try it 4 different ways. Let's like do it again, and which was really fun and cool and interesting. And I'd never really worked on a set before in that way. And we played all the music live. So even though we had these recordings from the studio, we played everything live. And I think they obviously ended up picking sort of like the best of everything because they wanted it to feel like a live band, which it was. It was a similar setup to what we have now with the show, in that like they built a bar in a sound stage, and the story came to life in the spaces of the bar.
Ah,
So that is where I think a lot of like our set now is inspired by what we did in the movie, in that like we didn't go on location anywhere. We were in one sound stage and we shot the whole thing in one sound stage in 6 days, which is also like a crazy thing to do for any movie, but
yeah.
especially for a musical where you're playing like live tracks. It was an insane challenge. It was in the height of COVID, so we were all testing and masking between takes, which was also crazy. And it came out beautifully. I mean, they submitted it to festivals, and we got to do a couple of film screenings of it, and I got to see it here in New York with some friends, which was really, really wonderful and cool. And I'm hopeful that if the show does well enough, they'll put it out on like a Broadway HD or Amazon or something. Because I'd love for people to see it, especially because the the concept album that we did, I only sing "Runnin'" on the concept album, and obviously in the show I sing 9 out of the 11 songs,
Yeah.
and in the movie I sing all the songs same. And so I know there are people that have been dying to have like a good quality recording of these songs as they're done in the show, and the movie recordings are just so wonderful, and so much of the arrangements that we did in the show that we're doing now, the music and vocal arrangements, are arrangements that we made for the movie.
Interesting. Now, I know you guys are closing on the 27th. Is there any word on a possible future?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I know that there are conversations around an extension and possibly extending into August, which would be great. Yeah, I doubt this will be the end of the road for the show. If I know Douglas and I know Douglas 8 years later, I have a feeling that they are trying to do something else. Now, I don't know if that means a Broadway transfer or an off-Broadway transfer or a London transfer. I don't know. But whatever it is, I just want as many people to see the show as possible and experience this music, because the score is just so infectious, and I don't think there's anything really like this, right? I obviously, you can compare it to a Dead Outlaw or a Once or a Rent, but it's really unique in the way that the story is told. and the storyteller or storytellers really that are bringing the story to life. So I just want as many people to experience it as possible, and I'm hopeful because the response has been so good so far, and reviews have been great, and like we're getting people in seats that there will be a life after this show or after this production. And it feels like has been just like such a wonderful proof of concept that like we can do this. And for me too, I haven't done a run of the show ever, and I haven't run the show because when we did the movie, we shot it out of order. So I haven't done like a full run of the show since the Adirondacks, which was in 2018 or 19. And so to get to do like a, a good, lengthy, meaty run of this piece has been so wonderful. And we're settling in a way that just feels so good. And we're getting the rhythm of the story and understanding the audiences. And I was telling my mom this morning, I love singing these songs. I love going to work and like playing this music and singing these songs. It's such a privilege. So anywhere that I can go play this music and sing these songs, like I will go.
That so comes out on stage. It really does. It's infectious, your performances. And I want to thank you for taking the time out to speaking with me.
Of
Um,
course. Thanks, Frank.
and wish you a great run.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks.
you.